Hello, everyone. The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on Treaty 6 territory in Métis Nation Region Number 4. These are the traditional territories and ancestral lands of the Indigenous people, including the Plains Cree First Nation, Assiniboine, Winnewag, Rocky Mountain First Nations, Stoney, Tsuut'ina, Nakota, Denisovan, Saulteaux, Mountain Métis, Michif, and many other communities that continue to enrich the land on which the town of Hinton was established. With that, I'll call this meeting to order at 4:02. Council, I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Haas.
Make that motion to adopt the agenda for August 9th, 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Councillor Nelson.
I would like to move that the agenda be amended. Do we need to type things, or we? Okay.
Is that okay? I can.
Yeah, it makes no difference to me. I just need to know how fast to talk. That the closed session item, council code of conduct complaint, and action item appointment of an investigator be postponed to a date no later than the end of August. So I could speak to it upon scrambling to try to get legal representation. My lawyer could not make it in time, either in person or virtually today, and she recommended that that it be postponed, as section 17.1.9 of our council code of conduct bylaw says a member who is subject of investigation is entitled to be represented by legal counsel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Cedar Olson.
Sorry, I just needed to catch the end part. So postpone until such time.
No later than the end of August.
So with that amendment on the floor, I'm trying to think of any legal advice or advice in order to decide on this matter, on whether we can postpone, or are we allowed to move forward and deal with this request after the agenda is approved to go and vote? And Cameron, speak to this. It's sort of my train of thought. Like, in order to speak to this, I believe I'd like to talk to legal first. So to just kibosh the entire meeting prior, I just don't know for myself. Cedar Olson.
So there is a motion on the floor that needs to go to a vote before the subsequent motion should be considered. So adopting the agenda doesn't preclude the next motion from being voted upon.
Okay, Council, then we have a motion on the floor to postpone this to a later date. Is that correct?
Councillor Haas has a motion on the floor.
Right, but there's an amendment, but I think Councillor Nelson is making an amendment to that motion.
Oh, to the motion.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Is that correct, Councillor Nelson?
Okay.
Right, so now we're dealing with the amendment of that motion. Councillor Magoon?
And just to clarify from a legislative perspective, simply because the amendment on the floor is seeking to amend the motion, not amending the agenda itself. We're good. It's in line with. It's appropriate legislatively.
Cedar Olson?
On the fly, sorry, I'm not sure. I would have to look at the council procedure bylaw or consult with Sandra.
Take a moment if you'd like to consult with Sandra.
One sec. Yes, I was not wearing running shoes. The legislative advice is to deal with the adoption of the agenda first, and then the motion to postpone the meeting to a later date can be considered after that.
So with that, then there's no amendment on the table, that it wouldn't fall seat there, and then Councilor Nelson would have to do that request after the adoption of the agenda is done. Okay. Council, any further questions regarding that? Councilor Nelson?
So at what point do we entertain amendments to the agenda in a normal situation? Is not prior to adopting the agenda?
So if I may, as we were waiting, section 194 of the MGA says no matter other than that stated in the notice calling the special meeting may be transacted at the meeting unless the whole council is present. That's what I was alluding to before. So I think that's two reasons. One, there's an adoption of the agenda, and you're asked to postpone comes at the meeting. You're asking to postpone what we decided to talk about, and you'll get that right as soon as the adoption is done. Anything further?
No, that's fine. Is it easier if I withdraw then, or does it matter?
But I think then the motion is not valid. The amendment's not valid. So right now we're back to Councilor Haas's a motion. Council, anything further? There's a motion on the floor to adopt the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried 5-1. We are Councilor Nelson.
So I guess now I would like to make a motion that closed session item council code of conduct complaint and action item appointment of an investigator be postponed to a date no later than the end of August. I won't speak to it. I've spoken to it already. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nelson. Council, we have a motion on the floor, and Councilor Haas and Councilor Stashik.
Yeah, I believe just to clarify, 17.1.9 is what we referenced in this one. And how I read it is the member who is subject of an investigation entitled to legal representation. We haven't decided yet if there's an investigation going to be happening. So to me, this doesn't follow suit until that decision is made, and then the member of council can have legal is absolutely entitled to legal investigation or legal representation until that investigation is began. So this I don't feel fits for this.
Thank you, Councilor Haas. Councilor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my thoughts are along the same lines as Councilor Haas. At this point, there's simply a code of conduct complaint been filed. There isn't an investigation underway yet. An investigator hasn't been named yet. So I believe those have to come first. And of course, as Councilor Haas said, once there is formal investigation underway and an investigator is named, then the council member is certainly entitled to legal counsel. But I don't believe it fits at this time. I don't believe it's relevant to delay today's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stashik. I guess my question to CEO Olson, I know we have Kelsey on the line, is any advice from administration on postponing this, or should we go in camera to discuss any matters, or just want to make sure that we're not overlooking anything in order to potentially either make a mistake to not grant Councilor Nelson's wishes.
In my interpretation of the bylaws, 17.1.8 is pretty clear on a member being the subject of an investigation will at that point be afforded an opportunity to, 17.1, though 17.1.8 is valid too, I suppose later on. The member subject of investigation is entitled to be represented by the legal counsel, is what that is indicated.
Thank you, CEO Olson. Council? That's all. I'll speak on my behalf. That's my understanding. To me, I see we're just looking to go through the process of does this, have merit to even consider that? It may not. And there are following steps of who would be the investigator, etc. And I think there's a time, as spoke to by previous councillors, of where the representation would fall. So I'd be voting against this amendment for this to postpone. Councillor Nelson?
Just had a question about action item, I guess the first action item that's not closed session. As we're stating, there's no investigation, there's no decision to investigate. Does action item 2 not, is that not why it's an action item? I can't speak to it a whole lot out of camera, but to me, the action item that's on there is that step, and it's within the same meeting. And I think it would be reasonable to expect that that based on other factors, that prior to the second agenda item, then that would be when, with that interpretation of 17.1.9, that I would require legal representation.
CEO Olson, any?
That is something that's possibly less clear in the formal complaint process. I think the intention with 17.1.9 is that once an investigation is approved by council to proceed, that representation of legal counsel can be accessed at that point. But it isn't clear at which point that is to occur. So it's based on, I guess, an individual interpretation. And this is an area that I wonder if Ms. Becker-Brooks would have some advice to provide. It is based on, again, an interpretation of the bylaw, and there are areas within that are less clear than other areas.
Thank you, CEO Olson. With that, Ms. Becker-Brooks, any input procedurally on this request that you could bring some insight to council on how to best move forward?
Sure, I'd be happy to see if I can help a bit. You know, I think the thing to keep in mind with 17.1.8 and 17.1.9 is that throughout the whole code of conduct investigation process, it is really important that, you know, a procedural fairness be followed and that parties all be given the opportunity to know the case being made against them and be given the opportunity to respond. And that's in your bylaw. And 17.1.9 also specifically provides that when a member is a subject of an investigation, they're entitled to be represented by legal counsel. Even if that section wasn't in there, fair process would require that that person be given the opportunity to be represented by legal counsel if they so chose. So if we kind of take those as where we're starting from, we need to follow a fair process, and have a fair process includes the right to be represented by legal counsel at your own expense. And then we go up to kind of the process that's set out when a complaint is received. The complaint is received, it doesn't become an investigation until the investigator, whether it's counsel or it's a third party who's appointed by counsel, makes the decision that it's an investigation. It isn't frivolous or not made in good faith or any of the other reasons. This complaint is going to be accepted as an investigation. We're going to move on from there. I would say that it would be relatively unusual for that to be kind of the focus of legal representation, though it may be that somebody wants to speak to that issue, whether it should even become an investigation. So there is a decision for council to make whether or not they want to give the extension of time in order to permit the councillor's legal representation to speak to this one issue. But so that would be the only issue at this stage, though, that a member of council or a legal representative would speak to. And I just wanted to take you a little bit further down in 17.1.5. If we kind of look ahead, and if council were to decide to go ahead and make the decision on whether or not it's an investigation today, and then who's going to actually do the balance of the investigation, there's always the ability, even once a complaint has been accepted as an investigation and that investigation has commenced, there's still the ability in here for an investigator to determine that the investigation should be terminated And it would be for all of those reasons that were set out above. So if it's frivolous or vexatious or not made in good faith, even though a complaint becomes an investigation, the investigator could still reach that conclusion. So it doesn't preclude that issue from being raised at a later date. Does that make sense to everybody? What I'm saying there, that you may want legal representation at this stage. You may want to speak to whether or not a complaint should become an investigation or it should just go away. But it doesn't preclude that from being raised once it becomes an investigation either. And I think that going ahead and having it dealt with at that later stage, once the investigator is appointed, would still meet the obligation to provide a fair process at that stage.
Thank you, Ms. Becker Brooks. Then I will be in support of postponing it. Thank you for that clarity. We as council will decide at the first step whether it's frivolous or not. If we choose to go down a third party, they also have that opportunity to say it's frivolous or not, or then investigate. So to me, I'm comfortable moving forward with at least the initial conversation, see where that leads us with council. Council, any further questions? And I want to clarify, we do have a standing motion on the floor to postpone. Okay, so anything further before I call to question? Seeing none, and a motion, please. Olson.
That item 1 in closed session, item 1 under action item be postponed until no later than the end of August. I'll look to Councillor Nelson if that's correct.
Sorry, I was looking at something else when you were reading back.
So the motion that you made was for item 1 under closed session and item 1 under action items be postponed until no later than the end of August.
Thank you, CEO Olson, Councillor Nelson. Although the council, all those in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. With that, I would entertain a motion to go in camera. Councillor Haas.
Make that motion to go in private.
Thank you, Councillor Haas. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we'll have you on the line there, Ms. Becker Brooks. Hello, everyone. I'd like to reconvene out of closed session at 4:25. Council, is any direction or questions? Councillor Haas.
I'd like to move that council proceed with council code of conduct complaint as discussed in private. Sorry. I'd like to move that we proceed, with council code of conduct as discussed in closed session.
We have a motion on the floor that council proceed with a formal code of conduct
Formal code of conduct, thank you.
as discussed in closed session. And I'll just, since we have Kelsey on the phone, Kelsey, is that motion appropriate in your mind? Does that work?
Yep, I think that is an acceptable motion when you're dealing with something that was dealt with in camera.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Kelsey. Councilor McGoon.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I believe the procedural bylaw uses the terminology investigation. So I think it might be important to have that in the original motion.
Thank you for that, Councilor McGoon. Councilor Haas, would you be okay with that change?
Yeah, under the circumstances, yeah, because council is the originally the investigator, so.
So what I would have then is that council proceed with a formal code of conduct investigation as discussed in closed session.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the motion on the floor. Council? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, Anything, Councillor Nelson?
Just had a more of a procedural question. Is this meeting not live streamed? Because the public is not allowed into our council meetings as not being live streamed. I thought that was why we went to live streaming.
Not 100% sure.
Is the public not entitled to attend your meetings in person right now?
To my knowledge, no.
It's not being live streamed.
We didn't do the usual like wait 15 seconds quietly thing, so I'm not sure. I think usually on the top of Zoom, it'll say it's being streamed to something.
I see Olson in our way. Thanks. Councillor Nelson had a question regarding the live streaming recording. Councillor Nelson, if you may.
I was just asking if we're live streamed.
Okay, we aren't live streaming this meeting. It is recorded, and due to the length and whatnot, will be up first thing tomorrow morning. The motions can be sent out immediately following the meeting.
Councillor Nelson?
Okay for now, thank you.
Okay, council. What we'd like to do, go back into closed session. Anything further? Any other questions? Councillor Moon?
Yeah, based on the previous motion that was just passed, I think we'll need to go into closed sessions briefly. So I'd like to move that we move into closed session.
Thank you, Councillor Moon. Council? Councillor Haas?
Just a question, is he also gonna also be here in that closed session for any questions that we have received or for administrative duties to go forward if we get a
To my knowledge, no.
Okay.
But depending, that's why we have Kelsey on the phone for anything procedurally. She's replacing Sandra today for that purpose, but Sarah Olson, did you have comments to add to that?
No comments. Was not planning to stay. If the conversation continues and there is some administrative direction that you'd like me to be present for, potentially when you come out of camera and are looking to make a motion, understand what administrative stuff would that would include, or prior to moving out of camera, to invite me back, that would be fine. I'm just in my office, so if you need anything.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Haas?
Yeah, just because I'm curious on timelines, and that's, I know administration, that's what we'll
Okay.
be looking at that, so, okay. But if we can have afterwards, I'm fine with that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, council, we have a motion to go in closed session. Councillor Nelson?
Just had a question. So as the motion's been made to proceed with an investigation, the members that are subject to that investigation would now be considered the subject of an investigation at this point, correct?
Olson?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council, anything further? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's passed 5-1. Stop recording.
There's lots
Just open.
Can I know?
Yeah, we're out of camera now.
Want me to hit record?
I already did.
Okay, captured all that.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to reconvene this meeting at 5:28. Council, any direction or questions? Councillor Stashik?
I'd like to make a motion. I would like to move that council appoint Sage Analytics to investigate the formal code of conduct investigation to a maximum of $10,000. Sorry, that was a little quick, wasn't it?
Is that council appoint Sage Analytics for code of conduct investigation to a max of 10K?
The council appoints Sage Analytics to investigate the formal council code of conduct investigation to a maximum of $10,000.
Thank you, Councillor Stashik. Council? Councillor Nelson?
I won't be speaking in favor of it, although I think it's good to be investigated. The costs concern me as well as the process to get to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Council? Anything further? Seeing none, I'll call to question the council appoints Sage Analytics to investigate the formal council code of conduct investigation to a maximum of $10,000. Council, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried 5-1. Council, anything further? If not, Councillor Magoon.
I'd like to move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Councillor Magoon. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously.